Just 1 minute ago, a move inside the House of Lords sent a shockwave through Buckingham Palace that could alter the monarchy forever. Behind ancient oak doors and beneath gilded ceilings, a decision was set in motion. One that targets Meghan Markle directly. Every title, every protection, every royal privilege. Gone. But what triggered this unprecedented act? And why now? The answers reveal a power struggle darker than anyone imagined. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. The reaction inside Westminster was immediate and electric. Whispers ricocheted across the chamber like sparks before a blaze. Senior peers leaned toward one another, faces tight, voices lowered, but urgent. Emergency procedural motions were invoked with chilling precision, as though this moment had been rehearsed in silence long before it reached the floor. There was no theatrical outburst, no grandstanding speech to signal drama. Instead, there was something more unsettling: calculation. A motion drafted carefully, language sharpened deliberately. A proposal not merely to criticize or censure, but to erase, to strip every royal privilege attached to Meghan Markle's name. This was no symbolic reprimand. It was total. Titles, access, institutional protections. The very framework that once embraced her as part of the monarchy's future. Gone. Even seasoned observers of royal politics struggled to recall a comparable move in modern history. Disputes had occurred before. Scandals had surfaced. Royals had stumbled. But never had the House of Lords moved so directly, so comprehensively, against a single individual who had once stood within the royal fold. The scale of it stunned even those who had long predicted a reckoning. Across Britain, disbelief rippled outward in waves. Phones lit up. Newsrooms scrambled. Commentators who had grown accustomed to royal turbulence found themselves reaching for words strong enough to capture this escalation. And beyond the United Kingdom, throughout the Commonwealth, the reaction was no less intense. For some, this was justice long overdue. For others, it was an act of institutional cruelty masquerading as duty. Social platforms ignited with applause and outrage in equal measure, dividing families, friends, and entire political camps into opposing corners of a debate that felt far bigger than one woman. Yet inside Buckingham Palace, there was only silence. No official statement. No reassurance. No condemnation. Just a vacuum. And in royal politics, silence is never empty. It is strategic. The absence of words became its own thunderclap. Was the palace blindsided, or had it quietly sanctioned this motion from behind closed doors? The refusal to clarify only deepened suspicion that this was not an impulsive gesture from a restless chamber, but the culmination of a mounting internal storm. The symbolism was impossible to ignore. This was not a generic reform aimed at modernizing royal protocols. It was targeted, personal, directed squarely at Meghan Markle. To her supporters, it felt like an unmistakable message that stepping beyond the institution's boundaries comes at a price. To her critics, it was proof that loyalty to the crown must remain absolute. And beneath the debate lingered a harsher question. Had Meghan become a threat not just to tradition, but to the fragile equilibrium that sustains the monarchy itself? History weighs heavily on moments like this. The British monarchy has endured abdications, scandals, and seismic cultural shifts. Yet no modern royal has faced such an overt, institutional attempt at removal from privilege. Not a quiet distancing, not a negotiated retreat, but a public dismantling. The gravity of that fact hangs in the air like a warning. Because when ancient systems move this decisively, they rarely do so without reason, or without consequence. But to understand why the House of Lords would take such a drastic step, we have to go back to the beginning of Meghan's royal journey, when the fairy tale first began to fracture. When Meghan Markle walked down the aisle, millions believed they were witnessing the modernization of the monarchy. A new era, a new face of royalty. But behind the applause and cathedral bells, tensions were already simmering. What appeared to be a fairy tale was quietly becoming a fault line, splitting the palace, unsettling tradition, and igniting whispers that would soon grow too loud to contain. The world didn't just celebrate a wedding, it celebrated a promise. Here was an American actress, biracial, outspoken, independent, stepping into one of the oldest institutions on Earth. For younger generations, it felt like the monarchy was finally catching up to the modern age. Commentators called it evolution. Supporters called it hope. Across continents, people who had never cared about royal ceremonies suddenly felt personally invested. Meghan symbolized change, and change felt exhilarating. But institutions built on centuries of protocol do not pivot easily. Beneath the optimism, there was unease. Tradition is not simply ceremonial within royal walls. It is structural, almost sacred. And from the beginning, subtle cultural differences began to surface. Meghan's directness clashed with unspoken codes. Her independence unsettled a system that prized quiet compliance. What some admired as confidence, others labeled as disruption. Small misunderstandings multiplied. Harmless gestures were reinterpreted as breaches. The air shifted. Inside the palace, staff who had served generations of royals found themselves navigating unfamiliar territory. There were murmurs of tension behind closed doors. Reports of friction filtered outward. Disagreements over protocol, over communication, over pace. Nothing explosive at first. Just enough to suggest that adaptation was proving harder than expected. Some insiders framed it as growing pains. Others hinted at something deeper, a discomfort that extended beyond etiquette and into identity. Meanwhile, the public scrutiny intensified to an almost unbearable level. Every word Meghan spoke was analyzed. Every expression dissected. Admiration quickly coexisted with suspicion. Tabloids oscillated between praise and critique, amplifying trivial moments into national debates. The pressure mounted not gradually, but relentlessly. Unlike previous royal newcomers, Meghan entered an era where narratives moved faster than facts, and perception hardened overnight. The spotlight did not dim, it sharpened. Within the royal household, power dynamics began to shift in subtle but unmistakable ways. Meghan and Harry's popularity surged, particularly among younger audiences and abroad. Their global appeal was undeniable. But popularity within a monarchy is delicate currency. It can empower, but it can also unsettle hierarchy. Senior figures accustomed to a carefully balanced order found themselves recalculating. Influence, visibility, relevance, these are rarely discussed openly, yet they shape decisions in silence. A divide began to form. Quiet but real. On one side stood those who saw Meghan as the bridge to a necessary future. On the other were those who believed the institution must remain steady, unyielding, immune to rapid reinvention. Progressive voices championed inclusivity and modernization. Traditionalists warned against destabilizing rituals that had preserved the crown through wars and scandals. The debate was rarely explicit, yet it hummed beneath every interaction. And then there were the subtle signals. Invitations scrutinized. Appearances measured. Language carefully chosen in official communications. No one declared Meghan unwelcome, but there were indications she was being watched differently. Judged differently. Within elite circles, the narrative began to shift from excitement to caution. Was she reshaping the monarchy, or reshaping it too quickly? Was she an asset to its survival, or a variable too unpredictable to manage? What began as celebration slowly evolved into tension, then into something heavier. Expectations weighed on both sides. The institution expected adaptation, Meghan expected partnership. And in the space between those expectations, friction hardened into fracture. The fairy tale did not collapse overnight. It strained. It bent. It revealed vulnerabilities that had long been hidden beneath ceremony. As the cracks widened, it became clear this wasn't just about personality. It was about power, control, and the fragile machinery of the crown itself. Inside the palace, loyalty is currency, and betrayal is unforgivable. As Meghan's influence grew, so did the quiet resistance against her. Alliances shifted. Doors closed. Conversations stopped when certain names were mentioned. And somewhere within the gilded corridors, a faction began asking a dangerous question. Was Meghan Markle a liability to the monarchy's survival? What had once been polite discomfort began hardening into organized caution. The royal household, long united by shared purpose and unspoken codes, started to fracture into subtle camps. Not open warfare, nothing so crude. This was quieter, more strategic. There were those who believed Meghan represented necessary evolution, a chance to anchor the monarchy to a rapidly changing world. And then there were others who viewed her as an unpredictable force, someone whose instincts did not always align with institutional restraint. The divide wasn't announced, but it was felt. Concerns over media strategy became the first battleground. The monarchy survives not just on ceremony but on narrative control. Carefully measured appearances, carefully crafted silence. Meghan, however, carried a modern understanding of visibility. She knew the power of storytelling. She understood public engagement in a way that felt new, even disruptive. To supporters, she was reshaping communication for the digital age. To skeptics, she was bypassing the slow, deliberate machinery that had protected the crown for generations. Every interview, every speech, every subtle shift in tone raised questions behind closed doors. Senior royal advisors began exerting quiet influence. These were figures rarely seen yet deeply entrenched, guardians of precedent, protectors of continuity. They had witnessed scandals before and navigated crises without dismantling the institution. To them, stability was sacred. And Meghan's growing independence, her willingness to speak candidly, to chart initiatives on her own terms, felt less like empowerment and more like a crack in the foundation. Warnings were issued, softly at first. Suggestions to align more closely with established protocol. Recommendations framed as guidance. But beneath the civility was concern. The tension between modernization and preservation sharpened with every passing month. Meghan's popularity, especially abroad, surged. Crowds responded to her warmth. Global audiences connected to her story. Yet popularity within a monarchy is complex. It can elevate the institution, or shift attention in ways that unsettle hierarchy. Whispers began circulating that lines were being blurred, that roles were expanding beyond traditional limits. That precedent, centuries of it, was quietly being tested. There was also a growing perception that Meghan operated with a degree of autonomy unusual for someone in her position. Whether fair or not, that perception gained traction. Decisions were scrutinized. Intentions were questioned. Routine matters were interpreted as symbolic gestures of independence. Some saw strength, others saw defiance. And in institutions built on collective identity, perceived independence can be misread as fragmentation. Fear crept into private conversations. Not fear of scandal, but fear of precedent. If one royal could reshape expectations, what stopped others from doing the same? If tradition bent too far, would it snap? The monarchy's survival depends on continuity, on the idea that it remains steady even as governments change. To traditionalists, the risk wasn't immediate chaos, it was gradual erosion. Then came the phrase that echoed in confidential discussions. The institution must protect itself. It was not a threat, it was a philosophy. A principle invoked during moments of vulnerability. Protect the crown. Protect the legacy. Protect the structure at all costs. And once that mindset took hold, the conversation shifted from adaptation to containment. What had begun as internal unease was now solidifying into resolve. Lines were being drawn more clearly. Strategies were forming quietly. And while the public still debated headlines, something far more consequential was unfolding behind palace doors. A decision point approaching with relentless inevitability. And then came the moment that would ignite a firestorm. One decision that changed everything. When Meghan and Harry announced their departure from senior royal duties, it wasn't just a headline. It was a declaration of independence. To some it was brave. To others, it was betrayal. The institution that thrives on continuity suddenly faced defiance. But what few realized was that this departure didn't end the conflict. It transformed it into something far more volatile. The announcement detonated like a thunderclap across the monarchy. There had been rumors, murmurs of dissatisfaction, hints of strain, but nothing prepared the public for the blunt clarity of that statement. They were stepping back, carving out a new role, redefining their place within a centuries-old structure that does not bend easily. Shock rippled through the royal household, through parliament, through living rooms across Britain. This was not a quiet adjustment negotiated in private. It was public, immediate, unmistakable. Behind closed doors, urgency replaced ceremony. Negotiations began at a pace rarely seen within royal tradition. Titles, responsibilities, funding, security, each detail carried enormous symbolic weight. Every concession felt like a precedent. Every compromise felt like a fracture. Senior figures moved carefully, aware that history would judge their response. Could the monarchy allow flexibility without appearing weak? Could it deny autonomy without seeming cruel? The balancing act was perilous. The symbolism was impossible to ignore. Meghan and Harry were relinquishing official duties, yet retaining their titles. It was a half step that satisfied no one fully. To supporters, it was a reasonable evolution, modern royals forging a hybrid path between service and independence. To critics, it was an unacceptable contradiction. You cannot step away from obligation while keeping the prestige, they argued. You cannot redefine monarchy on your own terms. The debate intensified not just in tabloids but in elite circles where tradition is guarded fiercely. Then came the questions of finance and security, issues less glamorous but far more explosive. Who would pay for protection? What responsibilities remained? What privileges continued? The discussion was not simply administrative. It was philosophical. What does it mean to be royal if not fully bound by royal duty? The institution, built on mutual obligation, struggled to reconcile this new arrangement. And beneath the official language lay a harder truth: trust had eroded. Public narrative shifted rapidly. Headlines framed it as a rift. Commentators spoke openly of division. The fairy tale had not just cracked, it had splintered. Families debated loyalties. Supporters saw courage in stepping away from a suffocating system. Traditionalists saw abandonment. The monarchy, long presented as unified and unshakable, now appeared vulnerable, its internal disagreements exposed to the world. Within establishment circles, resentment began to simmer. There was a perception that the departure had been orchestrated with strategic precision, leveraging public sympathy while placing the institution on the defensive. Whether that perception was fair or not, it gained traction. Some felt blindsided. Others felt manipulated. And once resentment takes root in a system built on hierarchy and loyalty, it does not dissipate quietly. Seeds were planted in that moment, seeds of future retaliation, of institutional recalibration. The departure was framed as a fresh start, but to many within the corridors of power, it felt like an unfinished battle. Lines had been crossed, protocol had been challenged, authority had been tested publicly, and though agreements were reached, signatures inked and statements released, something fundamental had shifted. The conflict did not dissolve with their exit. It evolved. It hardened. What began as a personal decision was morphing into a broader confrontation about power, identity, and control within the monarchy itself. What followed wasn't reconciliation. It was escalation. The battlefield shifted from palace halls to television screens and headlines. Interviews, documentaries, statements, each revelation struck like a thunderclap. Supporters saw truth-telling. Critics saw calculated damage. And within the House of Lords, patience was thinning. Because in their view, this wasn't just media drama, it was constitutional instability. What had once been whispered in corridors was now broadcast to millions. Carefully worded interviews turned into global spectacles. Personal grievances became public testimony. Allegations, heavy and unfiltered, cut through the monarchy's carefully polished image. For some viewers, it was catharsis. Long-suppressed frustrations finally spoken aloud. For others, it was an unforgivable breach of discretion. The unwritten rule of royalty had always been simple: endure privately, present unity publicly. That rule had just been shattered. Public perception began to shift in unpredictable waves. Sympathy surged in some quarters, especially among younger generations who valued transparency over tradition. They saw courage in confronting an institution that rarely acknowledged internal strain. But in more traditional circles, the reaction was fierce. The monarchy, they argued, had survived precisely because it shielded itself from open confrontation. Airing grievances on international platforms felt less like healing and more like detonation. The allegations themselves were explosive. claims of isolation, of internal coldness, of systemic issues that struck at the monarchy's moral core. Even without proof, the impact was seismic. Institutions built on legacy depend on credibility. Once that credibility is publicly questioned, it becomes vulnerable in ways no ceremony can repair. Senior figures who had weathered decades of scandal understood the danger immediately. Reputation is not merely symbolic, it underpins authority. International attention amplified the pressure beyond anything the palace could contain. Global audiences weighed in with fervor. Political leaders were asked for comments. Commentators dissected every word. What might once have been a contained domestic dispute had transformed into an international narrative about power, race, hierarchy, and privilege. The monarchy was no longer simply defending its traditions, it was defending its legitimacy on a world stage. Within political circles, unease deepened. The monarchy operates within a constitutional framework, delicate and largely unwritten. When its image fractures publicly, questions arise not only about personalities but about structure. Some lawmakers began voicing concern that the institution's internal conflicts were eroding national stability. Even those who remained loyal to the crown worried that unchecked media battles could embolden critics of the monarchy itself. Traditionalists sharpened their demands. Accountability, they insisted, must apply equally. If royal status confers prestige, it must also demand loyalty. The idea that a former senior royal could retain titles while openly criticizing the institution struck many as incompatible with constitutional dignity. Calls grew louder, perhaps not yet formal, but unmistakable in tone. Privilege without allegiance was, in their eyes, an unsustainable contradiction. And among certain lords, momentum began to build. Conversations shifted from frustration to strategy. What tools existed to reassert control? What mechanisms could clarify boundaries? The debate was no longer theoretical. It was procedural. Some peers argued that inaction would signal weakness. Others warned that overreaction could deepen division. But one belief began to dominate the discourse. Royal privilege must come with loyalty. Not selective loyalty. Not conditional loyalty. Absolute loyalty. The interviews and documentaries did more than expose tension. They crystallized opposition. They unified factions that had previously disagreed on approach. What had once been an emotional controversy was evolving into a constitutional confrontation. And as public debates raged, something far quieter and more consequential was unfolding within the red benches of Parliament. And behind closed parliamentary doors, that belief was beginning to harden into action. Ancient traditions rarely move quickly, but when they do, it signals something seismic. Today, within the red benches of the House of Lords, a motion was quietly introduced that could dismantle Meghan's remaining royal identity. No fanfare, no warning, just a calculated step that insiders describe as inevitable. But who orchestrated it, and what exactly does it seek to erase? The atmosphere inside the chamber was heavy, restrained, almost clinical. This was not a spectacle designed for roaring applause. It was a maneuver executed with discipline. Papers exchanged, language refined. Every phrase weighed against centuries of constitutional caution. The House of Lords is not impulsive. It is deliberate, sometimes painfully so, which is why the introduction of this motion carried such force. It suggested preparation, coordination, a belief that the moment had arrived. The mechanism itself was complex, rooted in constitutional nuance rather than emotional outrage. Stripping royal privileges is not a matter of rhetoric, it demands legislative precision. Titles are entwined with acts of parliament. Protections are layered within royal decrees. Privileges are sustained through precedent. To unravel them requires careful navigation of legal pathways that have rarely been tested in modern times. Yet the architects of this motion appeared confident. They were not improvising. They were executing. Politically, the motivations were framed in sober terms. Supporters of the motion argued that this was not about personal grievance, but about safeguarding the institution. They spoke of constitutional integrity, of maintaining clarity between public duty and private enterprise. In their view, retaining royal status while operating independently had created a blurred line, one that risked undermining public trust. They insisted this was corrective, not punitive. A restoration of balance. But beneath that language was a sharper undercurrent. For some peers, this was about reasserting authority. The monarchy's stability depends on hierarchy. If that hierarchy appears negotiable, its symbolic power weakens. The motion, therefore, was presented as a reaffirmation of structure, a message that privilege flows from service, and when service ends, privilege must be reconsidered. It was an argument designed to resonate with traditionalists who feared erosion. Not everyone agreed. Dissenting voices rose cautiously within the chamber. Some warned that targeting one individual in such a sweeping manner risked setting a dangerous precedent. If Parliament could so visibly dismantle a royal standing, what shield remained for others? Would the crown appear politicized? Would this deepen public division rather than resolve it? These concerns were not dismissed outright, but they were outweighed by a growing conviction that inaction posed greater risk. There were also whispers of ripple effects. If Meghan's privileges were removed entirely, what of Harry? His status, his titles, his relationship to the crown, would they remain untouched? Could one half of a royal partnership be severed without destabilizing the other? The implications extended beyond a single name. They reached into the very architecture of succession and symbolism. Every step forward carried unseen consequences. The timing was not accidental. Observers noted how the motion followed months of intensified public debate. After interviews, after global scrutiny, after rising political discomfort, it arrived at a moment when patience had thinned and narratives had hardened. Some called it reactionary. Others called it strategic. But few doubted that the decision to move now reflected a calculation that the ground had shifted enough to justify decisive action. What makes this moment extraordinary is not merely the content of the motion, but the message it sends. The House of Lords, often cautious to a fault, has signaled that boundaries exist, and that those boundaries can be enforced. Quietly, methodically, without spectacle. Yet stripping privilege isn't just symbolic, it carries consequences that could reverberate far beyond Westminster. Behind the titles and parliamentary language is a woman at the center of a global storm. What does it mean to have every royal privilege stripped away? Security, status, legacy, identity. For Meghan, this isn't political theater, it's personal. And as the House debates her future, the emotional cost may be the greatest consequence of all. The monarchy has survived wars, abdications, scandals, and revolutions. But today's crisis feels different. In moving against Meghan Markle, the House of Lords may be defending tradition or accelerating transformation. Because in a modern world, every act of exclusion carries consequences. And this moment could define the crown's future for generations. Beyond the constitutional language and calculated procedure lies a human reality that cannot be reduced to motions and amendments. To strip royal privilege is not merely to remove ceremonial titles, it is to redraw the boundaries of belonging. Security arrangements that once symbolized protection become uncertain. Institutional recognition that once affirmed identity fades into question. For Meghan, the debate unfolding in Parliament is not abstract. It touches her family, her children, her sense of safety in a world that has often felt hostile. The shift from royal insider to potential institutional exile carries a psychological weight that no public statement can soften. Institutional rejection cuts deeply because it signals something more profound than disagreement. It suggests exclusion. The same establishment that once celebrated her as a sign of progress now weighs the possibility of formally distancing itself from her entirely. Public scrutiny intensifies with every procedural step. Headlines grow sharper. Commentary grows harsher. Supporters frame her as resilient, a woman standing firm against a centuries-old system resistant to change. Critics argue that accountability is overdue. Between those narratives lies a marriage tested under relentless spotlight, navigating loyalty, love, and legacy while the ground beneath them shifts. The strain is not invisible. When an institution debates your identity in open chambers, the personal becomes inseparable from the political. The question of belonging becomes central. Was she ever truly accepted? Or was acceptance conditional, fragile, dependent on silence and compliance? These are not merely rhetorical questions. They shape the emotional core of this confrontation. And as the House deliberates, the emotional cost accumulates quietly, intensely, beneath the thunder of constitutional language. Yet this battle has outgrown the boundaries of one individual's experience. The monarchy itself now stands at a crossroads that feels heavier than previous storms. Younger generations, already skeptical of inherited power, watch closely. To them, this motion may appear less like preservation and more like punishment. The risk is subtle but significant: alienation. A crown that appears inflexible in a rapidly evolving world risks losing cultural relevance, and relevance is the oxygen of symbolic institutions. Globally, the implications echo. Commonwealth nations observe not merely as distant spectators, but as stakeholders in the monarchy's moral authority. In an interconnected era, perception travels instantly. If this move is seen as silencing dissent rather than clarifying structure, the damage may stretch far beyond Britain's borders. Political leaders calculate quietly. Advisors weigh outcomes. The monarchy's image, carefully curated for decades, now hangs in delicate balance. Inside royal circles, calculations intensify. Senior figures must weigh preservation against perception. Does enforcing boundaries strengthen the institution, or does it expose insecurity? Does stripping privilege reinforce stability, or does it risk appearing punitive in a modern democratic society? Each choice sets precedent, and precedent, once established, rarely retreats. This moment carries the danger of irreversibility. Once privilege is formally removed, restoration becomes unlikely. The monarchy would signal that autonomy and status cannot coexist. But in doing so, it may also signal rigidity in a world demanding adaptability. Preservation or self-sabotage, strength or overreach. These are no longer academic debates, they are existential. And as the motion advances, one final question hangs in the air. The motion has been introduced, the lines have been drawn, and the world is watching. Will the House of Lords follow through and strip Meghan Markle of every royal privilege? Or will backlash force a dramatic reversal? In the coming hours, history could pivot. Because this isn't just about titles. It's about power, legacy, and who controls the story of the crown. Now the process begins, and it is neither swift nor simple. Motions must be debated, amendments proposed, arguments sharpened. Committees may review language. Legal experts will dissect constitutional pathways that have rarely been touched in modern times. Each procedural step feels technical on the surface, yet beneath it pulses something far more profound: the potential rewriting of a royal identity. Supporters of the motion insist this is due process, an orderly reaffirmation of institutional boundaries. Critics argue it is a dangerous escalation dressed in parliamentary calm. And with every reading, every vote, the stakes rise quietly, but unmistakably. There remains the possibility of intervention. The palace has maintained its silence, but silence in royal affairs is rarely passive. It can signal contemplation. Strategy, or calculation. Could senior members of the royal family step in to temper the motion before it hardens into law? Would a carefully worded statement or private negotiation redirect the course? Or has the machinery already advanced too far to halt, without appearing fractured? The tension lies not only in what is being said publicly, but in what may be unfolding behind closed doors at this very moment. Outside Parliament, the public mood simmers. Protest is not inevitable, but neither is it impossible. Supporters who view this as institutional overreach may rally. Traditionalists may gather in defense of the crown's authority. The optics of crowds, chants, and divided loyalties would only intensify the perception of a monarchy at odds with itself. And in a digital age, protest does not require physical presence. It erupts online, shaping global narratives within minutes. Internationally, diplomatic observers are watching with measured concern. The monarchy, though symbolic, represents continuity across Commonwealth nations. If this move is perceived as punitive or politically motivated, it could influence how those nations interpret their own ties to the crown. Soft power rests heavily on perception. A decision framed as defensive at home may be interpreted as exclusionary abroad. The ripple effects extend far beyond Westminster's walls. Then there is the question of response. Meghan and Harry have proven before that silence is not their only strategy. Will they address the motion directly? Will they frame it as confirmation of deeper systemic issues? Or will they retreat into quiet resilience, allowing the institution to speak for itself? Each potential response carries consequence. Each choice shapes the next chapter. Long-term, the implications could reshape royal structure itself. If privileges can be formally removed in this manner, the definition of royal status becomes more conditional than ever before. Future generations may inherit a monarchy less insulated, more legally defined, perhaps more fragile. What was once governed by tradition alone may now be governed by precedent carved in controversy. And still, there is the possibility of a greater twist. Parliamentary motions can stall. Alliances can shift. Public pressure can sway undecided voices. Or, conversely, the vote could pass with unexpected force, signaling that the institution has chosen firmness over flexibility. In moments like this, outcomes are rarely predictable. What feels inevitable today may unravel tomorrow, or solidify faster than anyone anticipated. The debate is no longer theoretical, it is active, immediate, charged with consequence. And as arguments echo through ancient corridors and modern media alike, the monarchy stands suspended between preservation and transformation. And as the ancient walls of Westminster echo with debate, one truth becomes undeniable. The battle over Meghan Markle's royal privileges may redefine the monarchy forever. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.